Welcome back, film fans. Hope you're all well, and welcome back to the second part of this small series that I'm doing, where I'm looking at essentially 10 movie franchises that I should love but don't. And that could be either because my sheer kind of apathy or indifference towards them, or it could be because I loathe them or despise them or hate them. So I hope you enjoyed part one, where I looked at films 10 to 8. And in this, I'm looking at films 7 to 5. So I'm going to do another 3 for you guys in this video. And just to reiterate, these are kind of franchises where, so I might not have seen them, or like I say, I might have seen parts of them, and as a result of that, I haven't seen the rest, or maybe I've seen all of the franchise and I have, I have a kind of a real severe dislike for them, as it were. And this is based upon the idea, remember, of kind of assuming that you're a film fan or a cinephile, that it's presumed that you would like these movie franchises, or that you kind of should like them by like a kind of the general opinion, or popular consensus dictates that you should like them. And that's where I'm kind of coming from with these in terms of a ranking. So they kind of get more controversial from that perspective as I move along. Okay. So if you haven't checked out part one, I will put a link in the description for you to check out part one. But like I said, let's get on with part two. So starting at number 7, I have and I've seen not a single movie of this franchise. And I know there is a lot of them. I couldn't tell you exactly how many. I want to say it's well over, I want to say it's over a dozen of these movies, okay? And that is, and I think British people are going to relate to this or not specifically, and that's the Carry On franchise, which seemed to be a kind of an industry unto itself for when they ran, because loads of them were made in a kind of what is a kind of relatively short period of time in terms of movie history, right? You're talking a period of what, not even a couple of decades really, in which this series of movies were made. And they're kind of like they're a series of kind of comedies in a particular vein of like almost kind of lowbrow humor that starred the same kind of troupe and cast of actors, playing different characters and in different kind of comedic scenarios or settings. And the reason why I've seen different bits of these movies, even though I couldn't tell you which one. But the reason why I haven't seen this is because one is the kind of the time investment that it would take to actually watch all of them, and two is I think that from what I've seen and from what I've read and heard, the kind of the type or the strain of humor is something that really doesn't really kind of appeal to me at all. But I think the main reason, putting those aside, because normally those reservations don't necessarily put me off seeing a film at all, like completely. The main thing is, I think, the associational thing that I have with these movies, which is when I think of a Carry On franchise, I think of like dreary, drizzly, rainy Sunday afternoon, Sunday evening, you know, type programming or movies where, like, you're dreading going back to school, because I'm thinking of back in childhood here, and I think that's where this thing is rooted. It's a very kind of deep psychological thing, I think, where you got the Sunday blues. You don't want to go back to school or work in the morning, and you're just dreading that next day. And it's kind of, I associate it with that kind of program that was on British televisions at the time, kind of Last of the Summer Wines and Antiques Roadshow and other various British sitcoms. I mean, I'm not the biggest fan of sitcoms anyway, particularly American ones, but there's quite a few kind of popular landmark British kind of classics that I don't like either. I'm kind of very funny in particular with humour, so with the kind of comedies that I like. And so with the Carry On franchise, I've just never seen the kind of again, I just find it's almost the comedic equivalent of Hammer horror, right? In terms of, I'm not comparing them in terms of quality. I just mean in terms of how they became a kind of almost like a cottage industry unto themselves, and how prolific and productive they were with their movies, even if the quality wasn't always consistent, supposedly. Because, like I say, with Carry On, I have absolutely zero idea. But from what I can tell, all of them seem kind of pretty terrible. It's interesting because I have a very good friend actually and they're his comfort movies. So like the contrast is just, again, one person's comfort is another person's torture, I suppose. But they would be kind of the last thing I'd put on as a kind of comfort movie, I would think. So that's my number 7. Going into number 6, this probably, if in terms of controversy, would be should be like number 1. But the reason why it's at number 6 is because it's kind of an outlier in this list in the sense that I don't hate them, but I'm more indifferent towards them. But for many, that in of itself will be controversial. And that's the Star Wars franchise. I've never been a huge fan of Star Wars, even though I saw most of them. So I saw the original 3 when I was young, when I was a kid. I saw the what was at the time the new trilogy, episode 1 to 3. I saw them kind of when they came out. The only one I saw in the cinema though was Revenge of the Sith, and that's only because I went with a friend who really wanted to go. And it was just kind of one of those, what the hell, I'll just go and watch it because I have seen Phantom Menace and Attack of the Clones. I haven't seen any of the new ones, and in a way I kind of feel my position on Star Wars was, particularly when Lucas, sold them to Disney, was I thought that is the worst thing you could do, because that is essentially you're going to go from making a film franchise, which was already kind of on the verge of being something which is a kind of just a milking of just endless kind of, not just sequels, but kind of the branching off of them of merch and things that were just associated with them, whether it was like video games or lunch boxes or toys, clothes, whatever it might be. It created a whole kind of universe into itself, really, didn't it? But I said when Disney would buy it that you're not going to get movies anymore. You're just going to get content, and that shift is going to, it wasn't going to bother me too much because I'm not that invested, but it's going to piss off a lot of the diehard fans and a lot of the fans of the franchise, because this is the most beloved movie franchise of all time, and that's why it's at number 6. Is because I kind of have an antipathy towards it. I don't really love, like, or loathe Star Wars. I don't even come from the position of a kind of someone who's a kind of a cineast who says that Star Wars, along with Star Wars and Lucas along with Spielberg, kind of are what symbolizes the kind of what's everything that's wrong with modern Hollywood for the past 40 years. I do think they were responsible for that kind of paradigm shift of moving away from kind of the end of New Hollywood, where kind of you have more kind of serious issue or darker driven filmmaking, to a kind of a blockbuster oriented kind of commercial model. But I don't have issues with Lucas or Spielberg and their movies on that front at all. I've just never understood. It's like one of those things where it doesn't matter how anyone explains it to me, I've just never understood the appeal of Star Wars. Okay, and then when I obviously grew older and saw kind of how somewhat derivative they were in terms of how much they kind of borrowed liberally from kind of Kurosawa's movies and stuff, and I suppose there's obviously elements of homage and stuff, like CP3O or C3PO, sorry, is a kind of ode to the android from Metropolis, the silent movie by Fritz Lang. Those just kind of added to my just kind of indifference to the franchise. And I suppose me growing, and now you can't even use the excuse that you weren't around, because that's what I've thought. Maybe it's because I wasn't around in the 70s and the 80s when these movies came out, but I was around when the new trilogy came out, and it's not like I didn't see these movies when I was a kid. And let's be honest, this is a franchise that's had generations and generations of new fans since the 70s, or since the early 80s when the original trilogy wrapped up. If I had to state a preference, of course, I prefer the original trilogy to the kind of the 2000 sequels, and then the like I say, the other bunch, the new trilogy I hadn't even seen. But I kind of feel vindicated in a sense that, in my kind of what were my suspicions when Disney took it over have kind of turned out to be kind of right and well-founded, because a lot of people are kind of just, they're kind of, there's this kind of, again, apathy and this fatigue from people. They're just sick of the franchise being milked, because the more you do that, the more you kind of risk ruining the kind of cherished, beloved memories of those that do like the franchise. But like I say, I don't really have a horse in the race, and that in of itself, I think, as someone who's meant to love movies, you're kind of meant to love Star Wars. And so that's why I suppose it's controversial for me to even say I just don't really care either way about Star Wars at all. And you know, if you had to put me on the side of a fence, where you have the side where, you know, kind of popular consensus says that these, particularly A New Hope and Empire Strikes Back, are two of the greatest films ever made, or you put me on the more like kind of serious critic minds who won't name those movies, typically speaking, as part of the greatest movies ever made, I'm in the latter camp, if you had to put me in one. But really, like I say, I just don't. And like I say, I am baffled when I see that they're ranked all time. I mean, I get it. I get their influence and impact on popular culture, but I think that in terms of film history is overstated a little bit. But I'm talking about all of film history here, not just like mainstream Hollywood film, which is like a one specific category. But yeah, those are my kind of general thoughts on Star Wars, and maybe I should probably move on because, you know, I don't want to insult all you fans that probably are likely to be fans. See, I'm assuming everyone's fans of Star Wars. See, that's how kind of popular these things are. And I go to number 5 with, so Star Wars was my number 6. Number 5 on my list, and the final pick for this video, is again something that is a more modern example of something that was is extremely popular, and my brain just cannot fathom why. And that is the Harry Potter franchise, or the Wizarding World franchise, which is the kind of wider expanding franchise or whatever. I know, like I say, I don't even have the Star Wars excuse, if you want to use that, of, oh well, you didn't grow up when the first 3 were originally released, so you're not going to have that attachment. You didn't see them in the cinema back then. Well, Harry Potter, I don't even have that excuse, because I was the target age for these books and films. And this is the thing, I was never even into the books. I swear I remember, it felt like one day I woke up, I went into class, and everyone was suddenly talking about these books out of nowhere. Not just talking about them, but like they had stayed up the night before to get it on release night, and they were talking about how far they got through the book the next morning, the first morning of school or whatever. And I was just like baffled as to like how many people were so passionate and dedicated and enthused over these books. And I remember my mum buying me one of them randomly, and it was Goblet of Fire, which is the 4th book. And I read a few pages, and I mean, it didn't help that it was the 4th book, right? And I hadn't read the first 3. I don't know why she did that, but maybe she just assumed that all kids love it, so he doesn't have the 4th because that's the newest one, right? I didn't have any of them. Read a few pages, bored, just couldn't get into it at all. But then again, I'm not the biggest reader of fiction, never have been really. It's one of my kind of guilty admissions, I suppose. But particularly kind of fantasy kind of fiction. And so, yeah, when the movies came out, again, my indifference to that is I didn't. But again, it's not even my indifference. It's the fact that, you know, obviously this is a series and a franchise that made its author, J.K. Rowling, a billionaire, literally. And again, I just don't understand the success of them, especially when you see the movies and how. And I know people are going to say, oh, maybe the books are a lot better than the movies. You know, that typical argument of, you know, the movies is not as good as the adaptation's never as good as the book, the original. But I never saw the appeal of them, even when they kind of attracted like for example, Alfonso Cuarón, the Mexican director, directed the 3rd film, I believe. Even that hasn't persuaded me to kind of go and see them, like a serious auteur directing them. I saw one of them in the cinema, again with a friend who wanted to go, and I think I went with him and his family at the time. And that was, I want to say, Deathly Hallows Part 1. And this is the thing, right? I swear this was the start of, we're going to split a book into 2 films. Because again, I just saw it even back then as like a kind of cynical, you just want to milk this for as much money as possible, because this was a franchise that I think every single film was successful, and it got increasingly more successful in terms of box office takings and popularity. And it's one of those things where you love cinema, you must, or you're presumed to automatically like even the Harry Potter franchise. And again, it's one of those things. I feel like its televisual equivalent is like Friends. Like every woman that I meet seems to love Friends and Harry Potter. Um, but yeah, I just don't. I can't share that sense on both fronts as well, because I've never been a fan of Friends either. Again, my point about American sitcoms earlier, it applies to Friends. Just I hate to single that out, but it's true. And so, like with Harry Potter, I just again never got it, never understood it. And again, I don't know if this is like I'm not. I swear I'm not a contrarian. I'm really not, but I think there's just a part of my brain, maybe it's like a neurodivergent part of my brain that just thinks differently. I always remember when I was a kid, right? And Harry Potter's a great example, but an even earlier example is like when I went to school one day and it felt like suddenly everyone had Pokemon cards. Like everyone was trading on the school playground, and I felt like I was one of the like only one of three kids in my year that not only didn't have cards, but even seeing everyone else have them was almost a reason for me not to get them, because I just didn't see the appeal. So I don't know if I've just been like, there's a part of my brain that's like freaked out by trends that seem to appear out of nowhere. I don't know. But I think that applies to maybe my kind of bafflement at the success of Harry Potter, because I just don't understand by what metric they make particularly good films. I can't speak for the books, but like even good films. I think you have to have already that prior investment in the characters based upon the books, but I think I've met people that haven't read the books and love the films. So I don't know. But yeah, those are three more examples of franchises that I just am utterly indifferent towards, or just have zero interest in whatsoever. Or, out of those three, I'd say none of them I kind of dislike. It's more about my apathy and indifference towards them, which in of itself is probably controversial. Although Carry On is probably not really a controversial choice for serious film goers. So, but to say that I've never seen a single Carry On all the way through, and there's so many of them, and they're kind of like, they feel like almost like an intrinsic part of British movie culture, is maybe perhaps controversial. But those are my choices. So number 7, Carry On franchise, number 6, the Star Wars franchise, and number 5, the Harry Potter franchise. Let me know you guys' thoughts in the comments on my choices. And again, if you haven't seen the first video, tune into that and let me know some of the franchises that you just cannot fathom. You can't understand why they're so popular. You either dislike them, or you're, like I say, you're indifferent towards them. What are those franchises? I'm sure there's going to be plenty of controversy in the comments if I get any comments about this topic. But yeah, those are my thoughts, and tune in for the next one where I'll be doing the countdown from movies 4 to 2, and then I'm going to do a special video, a special one just for number 1, because I have a feeling that's going to be very ranty. And actually probably the next one will be as well, going by the choices that I have. So yeah, be sure to tune into that, and as always guys, take care, and I'll see you on the next one.